whilst Madeline is making the presentation, if we can have our videos turned off, just because it can be quite distracting. Make sure that we're all on mute. So we've got presentation. Modulator is then going to give you a task or activity to do about 2 o'clock. And then we're going to come back to think about what we need from the support network meetings that are going to follow on from these masterclasses. So warm welcome to everybody, and I will hand you over to Modulator now.
Hello everyone. Welcome to this third masterclass, which relates to Unit 412, Leadership and Management of Effective Team Performance in Health and Social Care. So just to recap, because we are now going to approach the third and final unit in relation to this qualification, some key messages that have been delivered to date in relation to the qualification overall is that the units have to be studied in sequential order. Initial assessment and induction are critical to positive outcomes on this qualification, and it really shouldn't be rushed. This is where you and the learner or student can address any gaps in academic skills and meet specific needs, such as those relating to dyslexia or disability. It's important to have a timetable relating to the learning content for each unit and the assessment tasks, including a range of formative assessment tasks leading up to the cut-off date for the actual task, which the learner has to complete independently with no input from you apart from your role as an assessor. We've also discussed the importance of supporting a learner or a student with research skills and an ability to look at the key resources for what they need. So basically to meet the requirements of the learning outcomes for each unit and the assessment tasks. So just to remember that you and they are not expected to read every page of every document or every website page, but instead what you'll both be doing is drawing out key information to meet the requirements of the qualification. And this is something that's critical to supporting a learner or student to become a good researcher. So basically, it is to be aware that you can't possibly be an expert in every learner's or student's health and social care role, because that is what belongs to them. But what you can be expert in is supporting them to be a good researcher, to find out what they need to know using the resources provided and looking further when needed. Also, to support the learner or student to being able to reflect upon their practice and how they might change it to make improvements. It's also about supporting a learner or student to know how to use a range of evidence, such as theory, legislation, and relevant codes to inform their practice. And it is about supporting a learner or a student to understand what leadership and management means and how effective leadership and management can improve outcomes for individuals. So now what we're going to do is move on to this third and final unit for this qualification as Unit 412, Leadership and Management of Effective Team Performance in Health and Social Care Services. So today I'm going to provide an overview of Unit 412, the learning outcomes and assessments. Also, how can you go about supporting learners and students to think of themselves as future leaders and managers by accessing relevant resources? And finally, we'll discuss the support network meetings, because ultimately they belong to you and they are there for you, for us to provide you with any further support and guidance that you need to enable you to be effective in supporting learners and students to achieve the requirements of this qualification. It is also to bear in mind that this masterclass is being recorded. So if we get an overview then of the learning outcomes, the aim of this unit is to introduce the learner to theories, frameworks, and methods of motivating and developing teams to support person and child-centered practice. Now, what you'll notice in this unit is the emphasis is on motivating and developing teams, in the recognition that often a person's first introduction to leadership and management can be in relation to managing a team of people. And so that's why it makes sense to focus then on managing teams. The nature of health and social care settings as well is such that you can have, for example, an independent care home where there might be a relatively small team of people. And so being effective as a leader and a manager is really important, because especially, in fact, if there are any issues within a team, positive and negative, one of the things that I would say, having had the experience of managing small teams, is that you can really feel that keenly. So hence this emphasis then on managing teams. So if we look at the learning outcomes for this unit are to understand equality and diversity and the importance of Welsh language in the context of workforce development, skills and qualities for the effective leadership and management of teams in health and social care, the purpose and requirements of values-based recruitment and induction of workers in health and social care. Other learning outcomes then are how to use delegation to support effective team performance, how to manage team conflict and poor performance, supervision and appraisal in health and social care, and learning styles and methods to support continuing professional development. So what you can see is some really fundamental elements of leadership and management being introduced to students within this level 4 qualification. If I then move on to the assessment tasks, it's to bear in mind that the tasks for this unit are internally assessed and the results must be submitted to City and Guilds walled garden. So there's 3 assessment tasks linked to this unit, and the guidance on these assessment tasks can be found in the assessment pack, March 2020 version 1.1. So the 3 assessment tasks are Task E, where the learner or student is required to provide a written response. And this is in relation to the learner's or student's review of their organisation or settings, recruitment and induction process or processes. The second task then, and then also remember these tasks must be done again in sequential order. So the second task then is Task F, which is an oral assessment. So this is where the learner or student must read and review a scenario that relates to the role of leadership in supporting teams within a health and social care setting. And then there's a third assessment task, which is Task G, and this is another written response. And this is where the learner or student must describe the tools or approaches that are available to them when dealing with poor performance in relation to a specific scenario. As we've said, it is really important to be studying these units in sequential order, because, for example, in Unit 412, this unit, it does build upon knowledge and understanding from the previous 2 units. Remembering as well that for this qualification, the learner or student will be employed either in a paid or unpaid capacity or have access to a work placement within health and social care. Now, one of the things that is recognised is that it's likely that there will be varied levels of practical experience amongst learners and students and different degrees of access to relevant organisational policies and procedures. And so what we'll do is we'll look at examples of ways in which any potential gaps might be filled by using the assessment tasks as our reference point. And what I hope to have shown by the end of this session is that irrespective of learners and students' levels of practical experience or access to relevant organisational policies and procedures, they should still be able to complete these assessment tasks because of access to the learning resources. So if we look at the first task, task E, that is where you are required to review your organisational settings, recruitment and induction process or processes. And this is in relation to values-based recruitment and induction. So the conditions of the assessment and what must be produced is that the student must be supported to work independently under quiet, uninterrupted conditions. They must provide a written response and guidance in relation to this, and what merits a pass is on page 31 of the assessment pack. And similar to the expectations in the other units, it's expected that the response should have a structure to it, including an introduction, main body, conclusion, and reference list of any research, information sources or resources used or referred to. I think the thing about having a structure to the written work is it really supports a learner or student to structure their thoughts and to think about where are they going to place what they've learned into some sort of logical order. And so, for example, the first pass criteria for this task is that the candidate has demonstrated a clear understanding of the purpose of values-based recruitment and induction. And so some learners or students might use this as their introduction to set the scene for their evaluation. So what I'll do for this first task, task E, just to refresh your memories, is just read out the pass criteria. So what it says is the candidate has demonstrated a clear understanding of the purpose of values-based recruitment and induction. They've shown an understanding of what makes a recruitment or induction process values-based through an evaluation of how well the recruitment and induction processes of the workplace or setting support, or in fact don't support, values-based recruitment and induction. The candidate has shown an understanding of what makes or fails to make a recruitment and induction process values-based and make secure connections with elements drawn from the current process or processes. So you can see there in terms of the pass criteria, it is really emphasizing that it's not enough just to talk about recruitment and induction. What we're looking at is what is values-based recruitment and induction. Also then, in terms of what merits a pass, is the candidate has identified one feature of the current recruitment process that they would change. The candidate has provided clear reasoning for the identification of one feature that they would change, And this reasoning focuses on supporting the development or enhancement of processes that are values-based. So what is expected here is the candidate not only identifies what they would change, but how it links back to the concepts of and practices of values-based recruitment and induction. Furthermore, the candidate has identified one feature of the current induction process that they would change. The candidate has provided clear reasoning for the identification of one feature that they would change, and the reasoning focuses on supporting the development or enhancement of processes that are values-based. So that's the pass criteria. That is what you would be looking for when you are assessing this particular task. In terms of accessing relevant resources for this task, as I said earlier, it is important that learners and students work through the previous 2 units before working on this unit, so that they can build on their knowledge and understanding gained earlier. So, for example, learning outcome 4, understand citizen-focused services, is in unit 410. So that's the very first unit, legislation, theories and models of person-child centered practice. The PowerPoint presentation there, which is PowerPoint 3, values and behaviors, provides that wider context in terms of identifying values that are relevant to values-based recruitment and induction. So within this unit then as well, you've got PowerPoint 5, recruitment and retention, which is a really good starting point, as well as learning outcome 2. There are really helpful resources relating to values-based recruitment from Skills for Care and the NHS and Social Care Wales. And these resources, for example, the induction resources belonging to Social Care Wales, are critical reference points because they provide insights in terms of expectations and standards relating to values-based recruitment and induction. So in other words, again, what you're doing is you're encouraging the learner and student to turn to resources and organisations that say, this is what a good values-based recruitment and values-based induction looks like. And then what you're encouraging your learner or student to do is to say, well, how does my experience compare to what has been set out as regards what I should have experienced? So as I say, some learners or students will have access to a work placement. And it is to say that the reality is that it may be that somebody hasn't got strong experiences of experiencing an induction or a recruitment, but it is to stress that there would be an expectation that some learners or students will have access, even if it's to a work placement, or if they're employed or unpaid work, irrespective of the situation. Theoretically, they should have still gone through some form of recruitment process. So that could have been, for example, attending a meeting and talking about their future role, or being the current climate, having a discussion online, but there should have been some sort of interaction there. But just to say, really, for learners and students not to worry if they haven't actually had much of a recruitment or an induction experience in any situation, whether paid or unpaid or work placement, because that tells its own story. And so what the learner and or the student could be talking about then is, what did it feel like not to really have a recruitment, or not to have an induction? So that question can still be answered. So they can talk about the impact of lacking a recruitment or lacking an induction experience. For example, what did they have to find out as opposed to being informed and supported in their role? How did that affect their confidence or their knowledge in their new role? So it is to say, not to worry. I mean, obviously there is a worry because the recruitment or the induction should have been set out in standards, but in terms of meeting the requirements of the assessment, what I would say is this assessment task can still be completed, because there is enough there in terms of reflecting on, well, what did I miss out on? What should have been there that wasn't there? And so this in itself can create insight, and it can help the learner or student then to put themselves in the shoes of a leader or of a manager, to think, well, how would I do things differently? Because they know what a values-based recruitment or what a values-based induction should look like and the benefits that it can bring. So the next task then is a practical scenario. So task F is a scenario to be read and reviewed, and it's 60 minutes preparation time and 30 minutes with the assessor. So the conditions of assessment and what must be produced is, again, the learner or student should be working independently under quiet, uninterrupted conditions. And at the end of that assessment, what should be visible is the learner's or student's preparation notes and the assessor's oral assessment record. So these are two products really that should be visible to meet the requirements of this task. And guidance in relation to a response that merits a pass is on page 31 and 32 of the assessment handbook. So in terms of this guidance then, what it says is that the candidate has provided a response for each of the questions posed with appropriate connections to the scenario posed, and has identified at least one core value and one leadership behavior that can be used to improve motivation in the team. The candidate makes secure links between the identified values and behaviors and how these can be used to support motivation, trust, and respect. Also, that the candidate has demonstrated knowledge of appropriate theory, and it gives examples of what appropriate theory should be. And clear links are drawn between theory and how this can be applied to support positive relationships. There's also a requirement to show an understanding of equality, diversity, and the importance of Welsh language within the context of a team situation, and that the candidate would draw upon specific examples. And finally, there's reference to the learner or student having identified a process that can be used to manage effective delegation. So the guidance is in there between page 31 and 32 of the assessment pack. So in terms of accessing relevant resources for this task, this is a further task that builds on knowledge and understanding from the previous units. So for example, in Learning Outcome 1 in Unit 410, which is the first unit, there's the learning outcome in relation to equality and diversity and the right to communicate in Welsh and the active offer. And also then in the second unit, 411, there is theoretical approaches of leadership, management, innovation and change. So you can see clearly by the time we get to this final unit, what this learner or student has been doing constantly throughout this qualification is building up their layers of knowledge, so that by the time they reach this third unit, they have a really good foundation of underpinning knowledge to support them to then step into the shoes of a leader and a manager. So the resources that are listed will enable a learner or student to complete the task, and it is to assure you that they don't have to have had leadership and management experience, because this task is about assessing a learner's or student's ability to apply what they've learned to a practical scenario. And when you were invited to this particular masterclass, you were sent an information sheet which provides some examples of formative tasks, and they are there as examples to give you something to think about in terms of what you might like to develop to enable a learner or student to develop their skills to apply theory to practice. And it is recommended that, similar to the last two units, learners and students are provided with a range of formative tasks. And before we go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to talk you through, just give you a brief overview really of those formative tasks, so that you get a sense of the different styles of those formative tasks to inform your own thinking about what you might like to develop to support learners and students. So the first formative task that is in that information sheet relates to the Census Framework. And in that information sheet, basically, whenever anything is referred to, it links straight back to the Health and Care Learning Wales website. So, for example, the Census Framework is one of the PowerPoint presentations that the students can access. And the Census Framework exercise is one that has been designed to encourage learners and students to think of the impact of the framework on individuals and also on team members. So this formative task provides examples of encouraging learners and students to step into the shoes of a leader and manager. And when you look at the Census Framework formative task, what you'll see is that what's been done is that just to get, help learners and students think about things is, for example, if I just read out, the top line is the 6 senses, and the guidance is, you are the leader and manager of your team. List some of your actions and behaviours that may develop these senses for staff. Think about the development of these senses upon staff members' relationship with you as well as individuals and carers. So one of the senses is a sense of security, and that is attention to essential physiological and psychological needs to feel safe and free from threat, harm, pain and discomfort. So the formative assessment, what it's doing is it's encouraging learners and students to think, well, how can we develop that sense of security for staff, knowing from everything that they've learned that in reality, employment actually isn't just about, especially if you want to retain staff, it's not just about doing work in return for money. It is about so many other things that are described within the unit, such as interaction with others and caring about what you do and feeling a sense of belonging. So what what that particular question is asking a learner or student is, well, how do you engender that sense of security for staff? And so the example that's given is for staff members, it could be that as a leader or manager, you foster an open culture where they feel confident in expressing their views or raising concerns about poor practice. Because if you think about it, if you don't feel secure in your work environment and you don't feel safe, chances are if things go wrong, which invariably they will go wrong because that's the nature of being human and being within human situations, you are less likely to admit to what has gone wrong and also how perhaps you contributed and towards what went wrong and how you can all learn from it. So what you'll see in that particular example of a formative task is getting learners or students to think about, well, how can I enable a team that I manage, team members that I manage, to feel safe enough and to feel secure enough and to trust me ultimately as a leader and manager to come and tell me when something has gone wrong, so that learning can take place as a result of it. So that's one example of a formative task. And what I've done is included different types of formative tasks. So for example, the next one then is about motivators or demotivators. So how as a leader or a manager, can you motivate a team? Alternatively, what demotivates team? And furthermore, if you motivate a team and they enjoy being in their job and they gain satisfaction and a sense of reward, not just monetary reward, but other types of reward, such as emotional reward and feeling valued and a sense of belonging, you're more likely to retain staff. But if you have staff and team members that actually don't feel like part of a team and feel disconnected from the organization, for example, that employs them, and if they don't feel, for example, that they're developing and growing, there is an increased risk of them leaving. So this formative task that's in here, motivators or demotivators, it's a simple tick box exercise. So it says, having read the handout about theories on motivation, please complete table 1 by ticking the box that you think is most likely to motivate or demotivate staff as a team leader and manager. And the formative assessment, there's an acknowledgement that this is a very simplistic way of thinking about it. But again, it's encouraging someone who might never have become a lead, might never at this point been a leader or manager, think about, well, how would that feel like for me? So for example, your behavior as a leader and manager, the scenario, a positive is, for example, you organize a team lunch and ensure that everyone can make it to engender a sense of belonging within the team. But so, that's something that could positive and motivate. However, a potential demotivator, you are having problems with one team member who is not pulling their weight. You decide to address the team as a whole to say that you are unhappy with their performance rather than dealing with the team member separately. So these are very sort of discrete scenarios, but they encourage a learner or student to think about, well, to really look at that scenario from 2 perspectives. As a team member, how would I feel as a team member if I experienced that style of leadership and management? And what is my worth in terms of being a leader and manager? Is what impact am I making if I behave in this particular way? And so that's another example of a formative assessment. The next formative assessment that's in there, so you can see they're very different styles of formative assessment, and hopefully they'll give you some ideas of what you might like to use in terms of your own centre and in terms of your own tutoring. So the next formative assessment is in relation to equality and diversity. So the situation is where a volunteer or staff member has been verbally abused because of their protected characteristic. And the question is, how can the abuse impact on the volunteers or staff members' relationship with the individual? So thinking about that. Also, how does this impact on the staff members' feelings of being valued and safe? And what should you have in place to reassure volunteers and staff that their uniqueness is respected? And the key question in this is, what are the potential consequences if, as a leader and manager, you fail to respond to this situation proactively and appropriately? So what you've got here is a situation which encourages a learner or student to think about what happens when a leader or manager doesn't do something. So it's not the leader or manager that's been abused, but a volunteer or staff member. So what messages are being delivered to a team member if that leader or manager does nothing? So you can see how, again, what you're encouraging a learner or student to do is to look at it from two perspectives. You're encouraging them to look at it from a team member and how that team member might feel as a result of that experience of being abused because of their personal characteristic, an aspect of their identity. And then you're also encouraging the learner and student to say, well, as a leader and manager, what impact can I make, whether that be negative or positive, through the action that I take? And in fact, it's encouraging to think about what happens when I don't take action, because that in itself communicates a message and can make a staff member or team member feel valued or not valued. So that's another example of a formative task. And what I would say about that formative task is it's a good task in terms of encouraging a learner or student to develop their academic writing skills, and also to think about things like empathy and understanding, because although it hasn't happened to them, there is the issues of, for example, legal responsibilities, ethical responsibilities, and linking in with what we discussed in the earlier assessment task, having appropriate values and having appropriate understanding. Sorry, I'm clicking the wrong thing now. And then the final assessment task is, and in fact, no, I wasn't clicking the wrong thing, is this is in relation to, and I'll jump back after I've finished showing you this, is something to help a learner or student think about their own professional development. So this is about getting a learner or student to think about what they need to do in terms of their own professional development to become a future leader and manager. So the narrative is complete a SWOT analysis in relation to your professional development. And the narrative is, you know that you have much to offer as a future leader and manager in social care and health. Please undertake your own personal SWOT analysis to gauge where you are now in terms of your current professional development. And there's a link there to enable a student to find out more about a SWOT analysis if they're not sure about what a SWOT analysis is. And the suggestion that what they can do is take those questions out of the boxes and work on them. So just to give you some insight into, because what I was thinking back on was our students on the pilot qualification were required to do this SWOT analysis. And I remembered some of the feedback that when I was doing my marking, for example, I had from students. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the feedback that you might get based on my experience. So for example, if we start with strengths, what skills do you already possess? Well, an example is, I can remember someone might say, I have an ability to manage my time effectively. I'm able to meet deadlines. What knowledge do you already have? Well, a student might refer to the knowledge they've gained on the qualification. So they might understand what person-centered practice means in the setting where they work. What do you do well already? Well, for some, it was about, I have good relationships with the individuals that I support. And what do other people seeing as being your strengths? And I can remember one of the feedback might be an ability to understand individuals' emotions and how to calm situations, or having a good relationship with colleagues. In terms of what areas of development could you improve upon, well, that varied. Some students would talk about aspects of their personality or behavior that they would like to address. And then other students would identify very practical issues. So for example, it might be that some would, an example I can think of is wider knowledge on recruitment. So do you lack experience in any areas that you might need as a leader and manager? So it might be a lack of knowledge on recruitment. What is the knowledge that you lack? It might be about how recruitment takes place. One answer that I just so massively remember in terms of what do you do badly or dislike, often the two go together. It came through, I've lost count how many times, in terms of what students on the pilot award said they did badly or dislike. And if I had time, I could have done a straw poll to see what you thought it would be. And it was dealing with conflict. Basically, a lot of the feedback that came through was that in terms of what learners or students felt they did badly or disliked, was that they didn't like dealing with conflict. And then what tied in nicely with that, do your friends, colleagues, or family comment on any weaknesses that they think you have? And as I say, the number of times I read this response, which was, they think I'm too nice and not assertive enough. And obviously, in terms of being a manager and a leader, the decisions that you take are not always popular. They're not always liked. You may have to be involved in conflict, whether that be resolving conflict between two team members, or whether that be dealing with conflict between a team member and yourself because they're disagreeing with something. And so that was something very popular that came up in terms of when people were doing personal SWOT analysis. So I always thought it was an interesting one, because you think of health and social care and then you think to yourself, well, could you ever be too nice in health and social care. And then you think, yeah, when you think about leadership and management, it does take you down a different dimension. And it, you know, it was really good to get learners and students to do this personal SWOT analysis, because I think for some learners and students, it was thinking, oh, actually, I don't like dealing with conflict. I don't like conflict. I run a mile if I come across it. If I'm going to be a good leader and manager, and this sort of aspect of leader and management can't be avoided, you know, it really does get people to reflect and think about, well, you know, can I still do this? Is this what I want? Because obviously leadership and management is immensely rewarding, and it's not about that, but it is, I think what is good about doing this personal SWOT analysis, and also in terms of the tasks linked to this unit, is it's really level 4, laying the field and enabling learners and students to think, yes, I can see it's not all going to be plain sailing. And that's fine. But at least what this level 4 qualification has done is it's got rid of any romance linked to leadership and management. And it will highlight the great rewards and the great satisfaction that you get as a leader and manager. But it will also highlight the challenges, which I think, you know, as someone who has led and managed staff, is brilliant, because at least then the learners and students have got a really rounded view of being a leader and manager before they actually get to step into those shoes. And so then if we return to this SWOT analysis and we look at opportunities, if we stick with the practical example of, for example, students that said they lacked experience in recruitment, opportunities, what development activities and opportunities are available to you via your workplace? So it could be that a learner and student says, oh, actually, we recruit volunteers. And so what I could do is ask if I could get more involved in that area of the organisation's work. The next question, consider the workplace opportunities that are available to you. How will you make the best use of these? So it could be, if we stick with the practical example, work alongside a staff member responsible for recruitment of volunteers. How might you use your strengths or work on your weaknesses in your current role? And here it could be that learners or students says, well, you know, I'll develop my reflection further and think about how I respond to situations. If we were to look at something linked to an aspect of learners or students' personality, so for example, if it is a learner or student who says, I really don't like dealing with conflict, and I find it difficult and I find it stressful and distressing, then it might be that in terms of a personal SWOT analysis, the learner or student thinks, well, yes, I'm going to make more use of the mentor that I've got, and, you know, talk to the mentor about how I think this will be a challenge for me. And hopefully, my hope would be, for example, that a mentor who is likely to be in a leadership and management position might say, well, actually, nobody likes dealing with conflict. And in fact, if they do like dealing with conflict, there's probably an issue there, which is a separate discussion. But it doesn't come naturally to most people to enjoy dealing with conflict. But perhaps, so that's a big revelation in itself. And then there can be discussions then about, well, how do you deal with conflict, and what are your sources of support when you've dealt with a difficult situation? And then looking at threats, What challenges do you face in securing your plans to become a future leader and manager? I mean, one of the feedback that I can remember reading from students that had done the personal SWOT analysis came from the organisation in which they worked. So, for example, if it was a small organisation, what a learner or student might say is, you know, we're just a small organisation. There's not a lot of room there for manoeuvre in terms of promotion. And then, you know, the discussions can be had then in terms of, well, okay, there might not be a lot of manoeuvre, but what other ways can you develop your leadership and management skills during your time with that organization? And a perfect example of that could be, for example, when we looked last week at the last unit and the proposed improvement to practice, because you don't necessarily have to be a formal manager or leader to propose the change to practice or and to make improvements. So it is getting learners and students to think about how they can develop those leadership and management skills in different ways. The question then under threats: could any of your weaknesses threaten your opportunities? If so, how, and how can you counteract that? So one of the examples could be, which I've already referred to, if it's that you don't like dealing with conflict and you dread it and it makes you distressed, how can you reduce that to the size that it needs to be in terms of not seeing it as the entire picture of leadership and management, but just a part of it? And what tools and what skills and what avenues of support can you have for you to be able to overcome that particular threat to your opportunity? And then a final question in terms of the threats is, do you have any examples of failing to achieve your goals, and how have you learned from this? So it could be that, for example, a learner or student didn't complete a particular course, or they left a situation, for example, they left a job because they were unhappy, but they didn't want to talk about why they were unhappy, so they just left. So you can see that the personal SWOT analysis is useful, and you know, obviously, by all means, as I've said all along with all these masterclasses, these are just examples and suggestions. By all means, you know, if you're looking at this and thinking, well, I think a better question would be, by all means, you know, make it your own and adapt it or change it completely or use a different formative assessment. But these are just examples to get you to think about how you would encourage a learner or student to start thinking of themselves as a leader and manager, and what impact they will have on team members and on staff that they manage as a result of the type of leader and manager that they are going to become. And so that's basically, I can see we're coming up to 2 o'clock. That's where I'm going to leave it. And in fact, I'm going to leave it on this screen because we're going to have a break now until 2:30. And then I will finish off this presentation. But after this presentation, what we will be doing is we are going to talk then about what you would like from the support network meetings, because this will be the 3rd masterclass. And so in terms of the activity that I'd like you to do during the break, I'm going to leave this slide up. And what I'd like you to do, and, you know, don't overthink it, just jot some ideas down, just do it quickly. You haven't got long anyway, and don't overthink it. Sometimes I think the first thoughts are the best thoughts, because they're the ones that are sort of putting pressure on your brain in terms of, oh, I'm not sure of that, or, you know, whatever. So what I would like you to do is take the questions from this SWOT analysis and apply them to delivering this qualification. So, because then if you can take these questions and just apply them to delivering this qualification, that can help you. So obviously adapt some of the questions, but that can help you then in terms of when we get to our discussion about what you want from the support network meetings, it can help you think about where you feel there might still be any gaps, and we can help plug those gaps as a result of those support network meetings. So it's to take this SWOT analysis, adapt the questions, don't overthink it, just write anything, well, I say anything down, obviously something that's relevant, in terms of where you think you are really in terms of delivering this qualification. And if there were any gaps, do you think they've been filled? If there are any gaps remaining, what do you think they are? And then when I complete my presentation, after that, they can feed into a broader discussion as to what you would like to see from the support network meetings. And so that's it for now. I'll hand you to Karen. Karen, I don't know if you wanted to say anything before we break.
No, that's lovely. Thank you, Maddalata. I guess just my message to people would be really honest about what you think the gaps are. We made sure that we didn't have EQAs at this meeting so that you can be really open and honest about the support that you need. So if you could be quite candid, that'd be really, really appreciated.
That's great, thank you. So we'll be back at 2:30 and I'll complete this presentation, and then Karen and Susie are going to start off in terms of generating discussion about what you might like. We've got 3 support network meetings and the dates are at the end of the presentation, so don't worry if you can't remember what they are. And so we'll see you back at 2:30.
Lovely, thanks, Maddalata.
Okay. E and F, and also I'd given a bit more detail and some ideas in relation to the formative assessments. So what I'm going to do now is talk about task G, which is the 3rd and final assessment before bringing this presentation to a close. So task G says you are in a leadership and management role with management responsibility for a team member who has failed to meet organisational expectations around performance. Describe the tools that are available for you to deal with poor performance as per this scenario. The conditions of assessment and what must be produced is that the learner or student should be working independently under quiet, uninterrupted conditions, and there should be a written response. And the guidance in relation to a response that merits a pass is on page 32 of this assessment pack. And again, similar to the other written responses, there would be an expectation that the written response will have a structure to it, including an introduction, main body of discussion, conclusion, and reference list of any research, information sources, or resources used or referred to. So in terms of what merits a pass then, it says in relation to what is in the assessment pack, it says the candidate has provided a response that shows an an understanding of at least 2 tools or approaches. And the examples it's given, for example, are supervision, appraisal, that can be used to deal with poor performance. The response shows connection to the scenario, and the candidate has shown an understanding of how support can be provided that links an individual's learning style with consideration of the best type of development approach. And what I've done is I've got an extract of a slide that I can show you in relation to that, to give you some ideas, and has shown a level of reflection on their own potential ability as a manager or leader, with at least one personal challenge identified and with at least one way provided on how they would respond to such a challenge. So in terms of accessing relevant resources, the resources identified in the qualification handbook will enable a learner or student to meet the requirements of this task, irrespective of practical leadership and management experience. There's some really helpful resources there, and organisations such as ACAS, Social Care Wales, and the PowerPoint presentations provide information relating to tools or approaches that can be used to deal with poor performance. PowerPoint 7, that can be accessed via the website, identifies different learning styles and learning and development approaches that might suit workers who tend to gravitate towards a particular learning style. And so when you turn to PowerPoint 7, if you look at slide 23, but I've put that into this presentation anyway, that will hopefully give you a better idea of what is meant by that. And then as regards the personal challenges that a learner or student might face as a manager or leader, an example of a formative task that might be considered is in the information sheet, and that's relating to the personal SWOT analysis, which I've already discussed earlier on. So then if you look then to the left of this slide, we've already approached the SWOT analysis, the personal SWOT analysis, and how a learner or student completing that might help them then to think about any challenges, professional challenges that they might have to overcome. And then as an example of supporting them to think about links between learning styles and different learning and development tools, this is on one of the slides. So for example, if you looked at the application of the Honey and Mumford model, if you've got a worker who, through their sort of preferences and behaviours, would be defined as an activist, which means they prefer learning by doing, then in that situation, it might be that what is considered to be suitable for the way in which they learn, given that they learn very much by doing, is a discussion around work shadowing or secondment, because they're learning as they're doing. Similarly, if you've got someone who, through their preferences and the way that they behave, it might be a worker who you might consider to be a reflector, which under the Honey and Mumford model are seen as being cautious by nature. They may be suited to personal development for managers. So thinking about using reflective models, and then the learner or student might explore the nature of reflective models and what may be appropriate for that sort of learner. It could be that someone is seen as a theorist, so a worker who's uncomfortable with anything subjective or ambiguous. They may be suited to training and education. and a pragmatist, so a worker who's keen to seek out and test new ideas, may be suited to coaching and mentoring. So that is what is meant by thinking about the different types of learning styles. I mean, in reality, the reality is that all of us tend to be a combination of various different learning styles. But that slide is just to provide some clarity in relation to, well, what do we mean by links between learning styles and different learning and development tools? And so what we mean is, if for example, a worker is more inclined to have particular types of learning styles in the way that they approach their work and they apply their knowledge, experience, skills, values. In that case, if you were supporting a worker in relation to improving their performance, what type of learning and development tools or what type of approaches might you use, in effect, to build upon their strengths? So where are their strengths? Where are their preferences? And then in that case, what approaches or tools might you use to build upon those strengths so that you move a worker from a situation where they are regarded as needing coaching or support because of poor performance, and to move them from that situation of poor performance to improving performance, to eventually reaching a situation where they are seen as providing really high quality outcomes and levels of performance in the work that they do. So that is task G. Now, in terms of, that concludes the 3 tasks and the descriptions. Now, there are resit arrangements in relation to each of the tasks, and they're described in pages 15 to 16 of the assessment pack. In terms of task E, recruitment and induction, which is a written response, the candidate is permitted to retake the original tasks without needing to provide a different focus within their response. For task F, supporting teams, scenario and oral assessment, an alternative scenario to the original scenario should be provided. As regards task G, Susie is gaining clarification on the resit arrangements for that particular task, and she'll be back in touch with you about the resit arrangements for task G. So
Magdalena, can I just interrupt you there? Sorry to interrupt you mid-flow, just to say that I have an update on that, and there is an incorrect wording in the qualification assessment pack that we will correct. There are no plans to provide an additional scenario. It is the scenario that is written in the assessment pack.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Susie. And so that concludes an overview of Unit 412. Leadership and management of effective team performance in health and social care services. We're happy to take any questions in relation to this unit, and also now what we want to do is to have a discussion about future support network meetings. So there's 3 support network meetings that are scheduled, one on Tuesday 23rd of March, one Tuesday 13th of April, and one on Tuesday 20th of April, and they will all be from 10 till 12:30 p.m. and Karen and Susie are now going to lead this discussion. And as Karen said before the break, it is really important to be honest, and it is a very I know it's a very old saying, there's lots of old sayings, but it does fall into the category of there's no such thing of a silly question, in the sense that if there is something that you continue to be unclear about or feel that you need further support on, then it is so massively important to be honest, because that's the nature of the masterclasses and also the support network meetings. Ultimately, these support network meetings belong to yourselves as the centres and the tutors that will be taking this qualification forward. And we really want you to feel confident and that you've got all the skills that you need to take this qualification forward. And so what I'll do, I'll hand you over to Karen and Susie now, so that the feedback that you give now will inform the shape and the content of these future support network meetings.
Thank you, Mazzolata. Would you be able to stop sharing your screen now?
Yeah,
so that we
I
can,
will.
Lovely.
Okay.
Fabulous, thank you. Okay, so so I guess it's just over to you lot now. What are the things that would actually help you for the support network meetings? Having completed 3 of the classes with Mazzolata and some insight into the delivery of the predecessor for preparing for leadership and management, I guess is what else can we be doing to help?
Can we ask folks to put their hands up, Karen, if they have something they want to contribute, if that's okay, so we can get everybody.
That would be good, yeah. And put your hands up, and then you can put your camera on and talk to us.
Hi, Heather, you're on mute.
I misunderstood what we were doing. I thought everyone was turning their cameras on so we could see everyone's hands go up.
All right, okay. No, have you got a question, Heather?
Not at the moment, no, I'm good.
Okie dokies, no problem at all. Jane, Owen, Jane, you have a question.
Yeah, having missed the first 2, as you know, Susie, my question is really about the depth and breadth of what we're actually covering is. There is a lot to cover, we realise that, but even for ourselves, when we're looking at the resources that have to be accessed and whatever, even for ourselves looking at some of the materials, the things that we've not looked at before. So even where it's health-based, we know we have to cover, because it is a generic qualification, health and social care, but it's to what degree are we covering everything?
Okay, and is that something that you would like to pick up at the support networks, Jane?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Gemma, did you have a question?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly, yep. Gemma, yes.
Excellent. I suppose from the colleges, from Gow College's point of view, from my point of view, we're starting to roll this programme out now from next month, from the 15th of April, where we'll be doing the inductions. Looking at, the masterclass, they've all been brilliant. They've all been really informative and given me some really good ideas for our timetables going forward of how to prepare the learners, given the formative tasks, so that they're ready for all of those assessment tasks. I suppose my only concern is that when obviously the step up to management was done, I've had a little look at that, and the programme, am I correct in thinking that it was done with learners coming in every week? And that's my only concern at the minute, is at the moment we're looking at a programme where they have one face-to-face session a month and one virtual session a month. So it's 2 sessions a month. And I've been asked to condense it all down to 10 months. Because of our apprenticeship funding. If they do pathway 5, which is the preparation for leadership management plus the level 5, which is 2 years total, we are hoping to expand that, I gotta be honest. It just seems like it's such a tight timescale, and that's not allowing, if learners have to reset, and that's my only worry going forward, is just the timescales that are expected, considering the amount of formative tasks that we have, not that are expected to, but how to ensure that we are supporting those learners to make sure that they are assessment ready. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. Do you want me to answer that? It is to say that on the pilot awards, it was actually a blended learning approach.
Okay.
So they weren't in every week.
Okay.
I think they were in, I'm pretty sure they were in every 4 weeks.
Right. Okay.
And then, and I think what they had was 3 weeks of independent learning. So they had to do that learning independently, accessing the website, for example, and then they would come in, I'm pretty sure every 3 weeks. What I can do is, I mean, obviously this award looks nothing, obviously it's based on it, but what I can do is when we come to the support network meetings, I'll dig out the original timetable.
Okay.
And then I can say to you definitely how many, but from the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it was, say, they were 3 weeks working independently and then 1 week in.
Okay.
And we delivered, I think that was roughly 10 months as well, the academic year.
Yeah.
I can say, and again, I mean, I'm sorry, I know I sound a bit foggy,
No.
but I left in July 2019, and you know, life's happened, so
Yeah.
you know, that's the thing. But for example, I remember that students who started, for example, in January, yeah, it would be the same. So, for example, we had one cohort that started in January, and I think they had finished then by the October. So it was 10 months.
Yeah.
So they did, you know, they studied the 3 units, and it was a 10-month period. And then they came into class, but not every week. It was definitely every few weeks, because that was the thing about getting the balance in terms of we're really, you know, we're really conscious of people are working or, you know, volunteering and juggling everything.
Yeah.
And so that was the only way in which that could be delivered. And actually it was a very strong model anyway.
Yeah.
That whole thing of becoming an independent learner, but then the issue with being an independent learner is sometimes you could perhaps risk going adrift. And so that meeting with other students, that was a real strength, because that drew everybody back, even if it drew people back to say, oh, do you know, I'm finding this really hard, and everybody else saying, oh, so am I'm finding it really hard, but it kept people going, and obviously, you know, the contact. So, but what I can do, I've made a note, is that I'll dig out that it's funny what you keep, isn't it?
No.
I'll dig out the timetable, and then I can, you know, exactly say how, you know, it worked in terms of the blended learning approach, where they were working online some weeks and then they were in on other weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Gemma, can I just add to that, please, just from an AO perspective, you know, absolutely how you design your program, whether it's face-to-face, blended, remote, whatever you want to do is fine. What you need to be really careful of is that you have met the GLH requirements for each qualification, and from a funding perspective, the TQT requirements. So there is quite a hike between the GLH and the TQT. And from an apprenticeship perspective, you will be measured against the TQT. So, you know, it's fine that, you know, there are conversations happening within your college around duration, but just to be mindful of those external parameters that you need to tick the box for.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, both. Thank you.
We've got another question which relates to the face-to-face badge artists. If we do that one next, how long were the class sessions, so the face-to-face sessions?
They were in at 10. I'm pretty sure, again, what I'll make sure I do, because these are all digging through my memory, but what I'll do by this meeting, I'll give definitive answers. But from top of my head, I'm pretty sure they were, the sessions, they were in at 10. And so they were 10 till 12. And then they had a break for lunch and then 2 till 4.
A full day, isn't it, really, essentially?
It was, but it was, I think it was 4 hours of learning in class.
Okay.
Yeah, having looked at all the stuff, I can confirm that's correct.
There we are.
Okay, we've got a couple there from, sorry, I'll go up and down the thing. So we've got one from Dirk and one from Hayley. Hayley, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I can do. I was just wondering really if we could perhaps have some kind of breakout rooms or something where we can get to talk to each other and share good practice in terms of how we're sort of tackling our assessment schedule and our delivery. It looks like probably we've got a slightly different model to, well, the two that were spoken about there, because we have our learners in every week for 7 tour hours, so quite a full day, but every week for 34 weeks. So slightly different model, but it'd be interesting to see how others are tackling things and preparing their learners really for assessment.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to be able to share how you're all approaching this, Hayley.
Yeah,
particularly, you know, with everybody starting it as new at the same time. You know, I think it's almost like putting some of the commercial stuff behind us, isn't it? And so saying you're all sort of struggling with it, or, you know, trying to address a new qualification. So to share practice, I think is really, really good.
Yeah. I agree, Karen, and there will be some centres out there that will have already delivered the first unit, and therefore will have lots of experiences on which both to sort of reflect and perhaps share.
Vicky, do you want to come in? You've got a question there.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I couldn't even unmute then. I couldn't find my hand. Yeah, just I thought it might be useful in the next sessions to look around the processes around the external assessment, how that links in with IQA processes. I would find that useful anyway.
Susie, I'd have to give this one to you to answer.
Oh, do you want me to answer that now, Vicky, or is that a suggestion?
Oh, no, just a suggestion. Just it's something that's not quite clear in my head. So
okay,
the future ones.
Yeah.
Okay, fab, thanks. Okay, Jane, is that a new hand or an old hand?
It is a new hand.
A new hand, a new
it
hand.
Is a
okay.
new hand. Yeah, I am an old hand, but yeah. No, I was just wondering, just listening then to the lady that was saying about how they've planned theirs out, where it's 7-hour days for 30 odd weeks, and then Madhulata was saying as to the 4-hour sessions for 10 months, and there just seems to be a big difference in the amount of learning hours or the teaching hours. And I was just wondering if Madhulata could share maybe just one of the sessions with us, just to give us an idea of what was included within the session, because I'm thinking about the program delivery we're putting together. Ours is going to take quite a bit of time as well to deliver, and I'm just wondering, this is what I'm saying about the depth and breadth of what we're covering. Are we going too much into it as far as delivery, and therefore, you know, over-egging it, if you like? So it'd be nice just to see what was delivered within the step up to management, just to see if we can get a kind of overview of that, and maybe thinking, well, actually, we are going a little bit too far with this.
Madhulata, I'm guessing you've still got all of the materials, but if you haven't, we've got them saved.
Yeah, well, you know, the presentations that are on the website, they're basically derived from the step up.
Right. So if you were looking at, say, session 1, how many of those presentations would you be covering within a session, shall we say?
So thinking about, for example, I'm just thinking, say, in effect, the PowerPoint presentations would match the hours. So, you know, you'd have 10 till 12, that would be one PowerPoint presentation. On the whole, you'd have it as 10 till 12 would be one PowerPoint presentation. And then, for example, 2 till 4 would be another PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Sometimes the afternoon session might have been preparing people for their next formal assignment as well, wasn't it, Madhulata?
Yes,
so
that's right.
So,
yeah.
so because it was slightly different, obviously it was a taught program within the university. So not each of the university days, as we call them, were the same. So some of them were split up into that there would be a taught session in the morning and another taught session in the afternoon, and others might be a taught session in the morning, and then the afternoon would be a bit of teaching, then preparing them for their next formal assignment and making sure they were really clear about what was expected of them and what they were expected to do. And in between the university days as well, the learning, it was I guess it was online learning. So so the university used Blackboard, and there were specific tasks that were set on a weekly basis for those students. So so I guess it was perhaps a different way of delivering the qualification. So they would be asked to read another number of documents, maybe do a bit of research on whichever was the theme for that week. Mm-hmm. So the way that it was developed and delivered is that all of the content of the qualification was split into themes, and every week there would be a different theme. So some of that would be where the students might access the learning for that from Blackboard, and others might be a taught face-to-face. What we can do is maybe we can pull together what would be maybe about 4 weeks of learning or something to show you how it was spread out for people. I don't know if that would be
great.
helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Yeah. Okay. Can I just ask before I go off, where it says about your assessor will provide you with a scenario, can I just check, where does that scenario come from? Are they scenarios that we set ourselves, or do we get those scenarios?
Okay, Jane, now there's a couple of things that you need to sort of bear in mind with this one, because there are sample scenarios and there are live assessment scenarios.
Right.
And so you can absolutely access the sample assessment scenarios by going on to the relevant qualification page and go into the resources part. So it says key documents and course materials, I think is the type, and then you need to scroll down to where it says course materials, and then in the menu box you need to put in assessments and then sample assessments. So that there are sample assessments for each of the assessments that refer to scenarios, and you know, the expectation is that you will utilize those as part of your formative assessment process. You should not be accessing the live assessment materials for scenarios until such times as your individual learners are ready to sit those assignments. They are protected by password, and they're also to be administered using JCQ guidelines.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Lovely.
Yeah. So there's no need for your assessors to be looking at the live assessment materials at this point, is what I'm saying.
No. Okay.
There is another question, Karen, in the chat from Emma, and I know that Vicky raised this the last time we were together, and Vicky, apologies, I meant to go back to you on this and completely forgot. So I also was experiencing some challenges accessing the support resources from Healthcare Learning Wales website, and after throwing my teddy bear out of the pram massively, realized that it was a browser issue on my side. And when you go on to the pages, if you click the view button but right click it and open the resource in a second window, then you shouldn't have any problems. But it seems to work more effectively if you're in Chrome. But you know, whilst it may appear to you that the links aren't working, they are. You just have to open the documents in another window. So right click the box, select open in another window, and you should be fine. And if not, please do come back to me.
We've got another question there, Susie, but before we do that, I just want to throw something in and to see whether it might be a useful exercise that we could think about. I don't know how it happened, but I ended up working on the content of all the qualifications and at the same time sitting on the Qualifications Wales panels that approved them. So it was quite tricky at times to be looking at stuff and then looking at the, you know, anyway, we won't go down that road. But I remember when we were looking at the scenarios as part of the panel, the approval panel, and when you first look at them, you think, oh, this is really simplistic. And then you think about it and you think, well, actually, and you think about it a little bit more, and the more you think about it, the more you can see what can be drawn out of it. So I don't know whether people have looked at the sample scenarios yet. If you have, do you think it might be useful that we spend maybe 20 minutes or so looking at one of those in breakout rooms and have a discussion about what could be drawn out of it and then come back and discuss it or not? You know, those are sort of things that might be quite helpful for you.
Stunned silence, Karen.
Silence and not a helpful solution.
You all just raise your hands or put a note in the, yeah.
Okay, a few people have said yes, and I'm just thinking that might be quite a practical thing to do, you know, where it's about actually looking at something that's there as a sample for you anyway, and in relation to standardisation for across Wales, really, about the way it's being delivered. Okay, fab.
There we go.
Okay.
You've won the lottery on that one, Karen. Okay, I think Vicky had another question, didn't she? So it's way up now.
Vicky, do you want to tell us? Save us looking for it again. It's really hard scrolling up and down.
Yeah, I was just thinking ahead to the professional practice and the level 5 and whether any sessions will be put on for those, because obviously there's progression from this qualification to one of those routes, and you know the majority of learners will be doing one or other of those progression routes. So
okay, I guess I was being really opportunistic with these masterclasses. From some discussions that we'd had at another event where learning providers, or might have been some of you, were really expressing some concerns really about this as a new qualification, as you were trying to get your heads around delivering it. And because we had worked, I had worked very closely with Maddalata for the development of the Step Up to Management, I was able to approach Maddalata and do a single source tender to get her to deliver these, and I was able to do that really quickly. So it was really opportunistic. I'm not certain whether we would be able to do that for other qualifications, whether we would have the people to be able to deliver. But I guess, are there other ways that we might be able to look at how you could be supported for the professional practice in level 5? And I guess the other thing is, obviously I was very much involved in the writing of the content for both of those qualifications. And one of the things that occurred to me as they were being written is there's a lot of very, very specialised content there for a lot of different subject areas. And one of the things that I think we would like to know is, are there any of the subject areas where we could perhaps pull somebody in to do, you know, like a one-off masterclass for you, I don't know, on reducing restrictive practices or something like that. So I guess it's from you really about what might be helpful and how we might be able to do some of that.
yeah, I think that would be really good actually.
And to also just to add on that as well, there will be networks that I will be offering as a matter of course anyway, and you know, I'm very open to putting an agenda together for those networks that is sort of drawn from your insights or requests. You know, so we can look at some of the learning that we get from the support networks that we're using to do the preparing, and if that model works really well or those subject areas work really well, then we could perhaps mirror that, and that's what we focus on in the networks. I've got less of flexibility to bring in external speakers because I don't have a budget for that, so you know, it could be something that perhaps we look at and be creative around, but certainly there would be the intention from the Sitting Guild's perspective to offer at least 2, if not more, networks through the academic year.
I guess the other thing that we are doing, so I'm not speaking out of turn now, Susie, but we've been having some discussions. We ran a session a little while back, which was, oh gosh, what was it called? It had a wonderful title, Sustaining Quality Assessment Through COVID and Beyond, I think it was called.
Yes, it was.
That's right, yeah. And following that, we had some discussions about, I think the feedback that we got was really, really positive from it. We were very ambitious with the content and the input we wanted to do in it, but some really, really positive feedback from it. So one of the pieces of work we were intending for the next financial year is to look at setting up a best practice network and having a representative from each learning provider as part of that best practice network, and then looking at identifying what the topics that people might want to cover, and then we could sort of, I don't know, put those into some sort of ranking and decide what's going to be covered for the year. So I guess there are opportunities there as well to be able to pick up on areas that you might want a bit of extra support or a bit of extra information, or want to explore different topics and share best practice. So that is something that should be coming next year as well. Okay, so I guess the other thing, as I said, we've just talked about, you know, Susie will have her network meetings for level 4 professional practice and level 5 leadership and management. But if there are specific topic areas that you really sort of feel that, you know, having looked at the content, you could do with something on. I mean, I don't have lots of money, but there are some things that I would be able to do from Social Care Wales perspective, you know, for specific areas. And again, it may be calling on favours from people from the sector that I've worked with for a long period of time. But, you know, there are things that we could possibly do for different topic areas, because it's really important, I think, in relation to the quality of the delivery, that you feel confident and competent with the content.
It may also be, Karen, that, you know, we have experts in each of these centres that really are confident about some of the content and are willing to sort of, you know, share that with colleagues as a way of supporting, you know, all Wales standardisation. So, you know, if you are one of those people, colleagues out there that think, oh gosh, restrictive practices is my passion, then it might well be that, you know, that's something that you can help us with. So, you know, it's sort of, I'll leave that baton on the floor.
Vicky's asked about when the best practice network meetings might start running, Susie. It's on my to-do list to arrange a planning meeting for those. So to try and find some time for Susie and myself to get together and get those up and running. So I would really hope that we would be able to get together before the end of March, so that we can do some planning and get them running sort of April, May time onwards.
Yeah.
The whole idea of those, though, is that they're owned by you as learning providers, that we're just facilitating that, and that we want you as learning providers to be identifying what the topics are, and then we will be trying to help you, I guess, sort of have small groups that will then sort of facilitate something around that topic, and we'll sort of do a timetable for the year. So it's really about us supporting you and using whatever expertise you've got, but also, you know, there's some that I may be able to bring in as well if it's needed. So
in an ideal world, then we would pepper my bigger networks along that journey, so that, you know, there is a sort of a continuity there. Doesn't seem to be any other questions coming through, Karen.
No.
I've been sat thinking about some of the comments that have been fed through, and I wondered what people thought in terms of, one of the things that has come through to me really is the whole thing about, to what extent do we go in depth in terms of going into the learning resources. And then Karen raised something that I thought, oh, that actually might be worth revisiting, is the fact that the way in which we approached it was in terms of themes. And what I could do, thinking about it, for the next support network meeting, if people think it would be useful, I'm pretty sure I've still got the timetable that combine the learning content and the task. Obviously they're different, but just to give you some insight. And also, as Karen said, in terms of the themes, because there were different themes each week. And one of the things that those themes did, answering a question that Jane asked earlier, was, you know, the depth and breadth of what you look at. If you looked at one of those themes, that might be quite useful in terms of informing the depth and the breadth. So I could dig out one of those themes, because I'm pretty sure I've still got them, because they were in relation to each, the weeks that the learners were learning independently. That's those themes related to those when they were learning online. So I might be able to, that might be useful for people, I'm thinking, because it could be sent out ahead of the support network meeting.
Yeah. Gillian?
I think it would be really useful, to be honest, Madalata, because we've just started designing our package to deliver level 4, and we've just literally gone through the interview process, and we've followed the step up to management process and intend to do that throughout the next 9 months, setting out certain themes and working towards then obviously the unit, the tasks within that unit, but then using the materials that are set out in the resources, which are obviously come from step up to management. The other thing we did find in our centre was it was changing our mindset. This is different, and I think for assessors, they need to realise, I was lucky enough to be part of the step up to management and realise early on, this is certainly a different way of supporting people to achieve the level 4. And I think that's something as centres that we have to take that into account as well. If we try and go down the QCF route and deliver it in the same way, I think we will all really struggle. So I think using those materials and using that performer will certainly help others, you know, to understand the different way then of being able to support learning.
Great, thanks, Gillian. And the thing is that what we can do is I can arrange that the timetable, you know, obviously these historical documents, but I think they will help inform your thinking. So the timetable and, you know, the themes, they can be sent out in advance of the support network meetings. But at least they'll sort of help inform you thinking in terms of how do you structure the learning and the tasks over that period. And also it is that whole thing of, for example, the timetable, you'll see the number of weeks in which it was delivered. And as Karen says, even on those university days, although I'm saying they were in 10 till 12, then they'd have an hour for lunch and 2 till 4, that time was used for different things. So yes, it was about delivering the presentation, but it was also about conversations, for example, in relation to supporting those students and assessments and any particular challenges they were facing. And on that note, Gillian, I'm glad you got in touch, because is there anything you want to add about those university days? Because obviously you were there, we were working with each other, weren't we?
What I liked about them, where normally, I think for a lot of the centres, we deliver one topic per day. But like you said, these were hourly topics. But really, again, looking at the level we were expecting them to be working at, it was based on conversation. So we weren't actually there to teach them a particular topic, but get them to think about it in the role of a manager or a leader. And so it gives them some thought, and it gives them sort of the basis of information for them to go on for the next 3 weeks to be thinking about, well, how would that impact on me and my role as a leader? So I think that was one of the biggest things for me, that it's not about teaching people at that level, it's about supporting them to learn. And like you said, they had one day every 4 weeks in the university, and they also had clear deadlines of when tasks had to be in, you know, so it wasn't a case of, well, they can come in now or they can come in next week. They all had clear deadlines. And again, I think as a leader or a manager, we're often faced with deadlines all day, every day. And I think even that is a good learning tool for them to understand that, you know, that they have to stick to the ground rules, really, and they have to stick to those timelines. And for some, even that was quite difficult for them.
Brilliant, thanks, Gillian.
I think one of the things that you'll find as a learning providers is when you look at the themes and the content that Maddalata will present to you, you'll see how I've taken those and tried to transform them into the units. So I've tried to transpose those into learning outcomes and then themes which go around the learning outcomes. But you will see how you'll see the read across, and Gillian will probably be able to reinforce that. So I've kept, wherever possible, I've kept the materials that have been used and set them out in themes, and it's just reconfigured. That's all it is. The same stuff is there, but in a different way. So it might just be really helpful for you to see it sort of in a linear fashion, really, where it's on a week by week basis.
I see a note in there from Hannah raising a bit of a concern there. Hannah, you know, as I said earlier, you can design your delivery program that suits you and your learners, and you know, it can be a mix of different things as we've outlined. So, you know, taught sessions, blended, flipped, independent study, all of that sort of stuff is on the table. There is no set expectation around what your program of study needs to look like. What you need to do is to be confident that you've covered all of the content so that your learners are able to be successful in their assessments. And that is a partnership, you know, that's between you and your learners. And some learners will go very, very quickly and be very, very confident, and other learners will be less so. So there is an expectation that you would look after all learners on that continuum, as you do at level 2 and level 3. You know, so I think we all appreciate that you are looking at this as something that's really, really new, really, really different, and it's quite nerve-wracking when that happens. But the resources that are wrapped around this level 4 are excellent resources, and it's just about finding the time to look at those, make sense of those, make them your own, and hopefully then with our support going forward, you'll be feeling a lot more confident. And if you can feel more confident about this one, then there'll be similar models that you can apply to the other qualifications as well, albeit not with ready-made resources the way you have with the level 4 preparing.
One of the things, as somebody that was observing the step up to management, both with the initial pilot and then the rollout across Wales, one of the strengths, I think, of that as a programme was the way that students on it connected with each other and supported each other. So I know that as learning providers, you will be looking at very different ways of delivering this. But I guess I just wanted to throw that in really, and very often they would actually support each other through. It is difficult to be undertaking a qualification of this size and this level when you're working full time, and very often you've got sort of family commitments. A lot of people already had a team leader role or a deputy manager role, so we're doing sort of fairly responsible jobs. But one of the things that really did help people was being able to go through the programme of learning together. So I think I just wanted to reflect that to people.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. Some real lifelong friendships formed as a result of Step Up, and as much as tutors would give support to students, without doubt the support that they gave each other was phenomenal, I think.
Jane, you got your hand up?
Yeah, just one of the units that we were looking at one of the learning outcomes we were looking at within the first unit was around the biopsychosocial model, and we were just a little bit concerned with 8.2, which was specifically where it's got topics to cover, findings from research literature that referred to the model as a model that informs thinking on person-child-centred practice. And we ourselves, even as assessors, struggled to find research literature. And I think it's because of the fact that it's kind of common health. So when you can put it in against person-centred, child-centred practice, they don't marry the terms. So just trying to, when we're thinking ahead of where we direct learners to kind of think of, well, these are the things you can be looking at. We were struggling with that, and some of the information, the research literature that we were looking at was so medically based that we were having difficulty even understanding it. So for not having a health-based background, you might struggle coming from social care, looking at some of that research literature. We just found it a little bit difficult.
Okay, maybe we could look at that in one of the sessions, Jane.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, I'm assuming that you've used the presentation, because there's a presentation specifically around this, isn't there?
Yeah, but this one is about findings from research literature, so that's not encompassed within the presentation.
Yeah, okay, we can look at that. One of the things, again, I would reflect and feedback that there were some key things that came out of both the pilot and the rollout of Step Up to Management that students repeated over and over again, because I was part of interviews with them, observations of them being interviewed by an independent evaluator in relation to what they'd learned, and also some most amazing presentation ceremonies where they actually did they did poems and they did presentations and they did all sorts of stuff in relation to what they'd actually learned. And there were some key things that came out over and over again. The Census Framework was one of them, and that had a massive impact on so many students. But as learning providers, you will see that that is in so many of the qualifications now: level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. It's it's throughout. So the Census Framework had a massive impact on people. Some of the change models, people very often talked about doing model of change. The other stuff that people talked about was referencing, Havard referencing. And another massive thing that came out was the biopsychosocial model, and about how that had a massive impact on people's practice and the way that they were thinking. So I think it'd be worth us, perhaps Imagilata, spending a little bit of time on that, maybe when we come back with the support networks.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, I remember earlier that there was a question about whether I could look at one of the PowerPoint presentations. So that could be one that I looked at and, link that to the 8.2.
That'd be great. Yeah. Just noting as well, Madalata, that some of the links that you've got within those presentations are no longer accessible. I think Dawson Error is one of them that's mentioned a few times, but the company itself has gone into liquidation, so you can no longer access that site.
But I think, to be honest, that's the sort of thing where, well, Susie and Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, these are sort of materials as a foundation, but it will be now for centres and learners to update, look for alternative sources if there's a need.
But any broken links, etc., if people can feed those through, then
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we need to know. There is a requirement for us to keep our resources as current as possible. But as you can imagine, there are literally hundreds of pieces of paper. So if you do spot something that is wrong, it's so helpful if you either use the website to let us know. And there is a feedback page on the resources page of the website. And failing that, if it's easier, just drop me an email, or as Karen suggested, drop her an email and let us know. It is notoriously difficult to keep links current. Okay, Jane, can I ask you just to repeat the AC that you were having problems with, if that's okay?
The assessment criteria was 8.2.
In unit 410 or 412?
410.
410, lovely, thank you so much.
Okay, so it's just
Jane, you got more than I thought.
Yeah, lots of ideas about what we can start looking at, and obviously they will be able to evolve from the first one as well. So the first one, if there are additional things in, we can look at how we might be able to accommodate some of those in the next two sessions. So Steph will make sure that you all get the presentation from today. That will get sent out to you, and she will put in on that presentation, on the last slide, you've got the dates and the times of the support network meetings. The invite will come from Steph to everybody who registered to be part of these masterclasses. So you don't need to apply for it. It'll be the same people will get the same invite for the Zoom invite for the time specified. So I think it's thank you from me, and thank you again to Madalata for your insight and all of your work in putting this together. So
yes, very much so. Thanks, Madalata. Before you all go there, can I just say that at least one centre has already come to me to ask, is it okay for somebody different to attend in the place of one of the folk that have been at the masterclasses? And that's okay. You can do that. We don't necessarily need to know that you are swapping a place. But just as Karen says, it would be more beneficial if the same people attended all three sessions. So don't feel that you need to email us and say Mary Jane's coming in the place of Karen Wakeland. We'll work with you on that. You don't need to sort of give us any advance notice, but we will restrict you to two places as we have done all along. Thanks very much, everyone.
There we are. I think I've removed everyone now.
Okay,
Well done, Magdalata.
Yeah.
There we are. We got to the 3rd unit.
There you go. And now you can see you get more confident on a weekly basis with using Zoom.
Oh, I don't know about that. It's
Some
here whether
really
I
good-
like it or not.
Some really good suggestions came out of that discussion.
Yeah.
One of the things that is not worrying me, that's the wrong word, but I just sort of kind of thought, we kind of need to pay attention to that. It was really on the back of what Jane said, because I've gone back in and I've looked at Unit 410 8.2, and I think we really need to reinforce that where we have documents and recommended stuff, that's guidance. Actually, what they need to pay attention to is the language used in the learning outcome and the assessment criteria, you know, which is very different to the phraseology that's been used in the guidance around 8.2. So I think we do need to try and draw that out a bit.
What? Sorry, Susie. What?
So
if you look at the unit, let me just see if I can bring it up. Hold on one wee sec.
I've got it there. I will share my screen straight away.
There we are then, Karen. Look at that.
He's squinting over there.
Okay, so
oh gosh, it was a bit speedy, wasn't it? So so what I did, Magdalata, and you looked at all of this, didn't you? Is I took all of the stuff that you had in all your themes and everything that was there, and I just tried to put that into a format that would be acceptable as a unit.
Okay, so there's
8.2. We say topics to cover. So this is in relation to this theme.
Findings from research literature
that refer to the biopsychosocial model as a model that informs thinking on person/child-centered practice.
Which is guidance for delivery, but if you then look back at the unit itself, the learning outcome, the assessment criteria, what's been assessed is their understanding of the biopsychosocial model and how it applies to practice. Not the relevant theories, you know. So
it's the influence of the biopsychosocial model on person/child-centered practice, and this is where it comes into the assessment. Then one of the assessment tasks, isn't it, where they're asked to look at different models.
So I think we need to sort of talk to that a little bit, not that particular one, but you know, that's a good example of, you know, not getting yourself tied up in too many knots. You know, if you can think of another way or another strategy to introduce learners to the biopsychosocial model, and you're confident of your currency around that and how it applies to practice in today's context, then, you know, there's lots of other resources that are available that might get you there just as quickly.
Yeah, and you said that so much better than the way I said it, because that's what I was trying to say, because I felt that what Jane was saying, maybe I misinterpreted what she said, but I felt that it was almost like she was relying on that particular source of guidance. So that's what I was trying to say to her was, if you can no longer access that, or it's out of date, then what you as a centre or a tutor needs to be doing is finding something else, or supporting the learner or student to find that. Because as you say, the point is you're learning about the topic or the theory. It's not reliant on, for example, one particular article.
No.
That article is there as support, but that's not the definitive article.
And
I think it just reflects, though, the level of anxiety. I think that's what Jane is expressing, is that underlying level of anxiety that I'd picked up, which is why we wanted to do these.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with the best will in the world, even though the qualification handbooks were written to be a supportive resource and to help signpost and sort of encourage a little bit of independence around developing your own programs, I think that level of anxiety that people are feeling, Karen, you know, is perhaps maybe becoming a bit of a barrier in itself. Because they're looking for something to give them the answer.
There's loads. I just put in biopsychosocial.
I know.
There's loads of evidence there.
Of course,
there's loads
there.
of research. So yeah, and maybe just if we can focus on one area such as that, it just might help people. So not look, because we can't look at everything in the qualification, but if we can pick one, and I think your suggestion of using the presentation would be really helpful, Maddalata. And you know, just some examples really of gosh, research literature. There's tons of it there.
Of course there is. I mean, if it was me, I'd be saying to learners, right, I want you to all go off and do a search. I want you to all pick something or one or two things out of the stuff you've got, and then you're going to come back and you're going to discuss it, and then we're going to talk about values, and we're going to talk about application, we're going to talk about difference, and we're going to talk about, but actually you bring the stuff in and let's see what it is in terms of reliability and applicability and all of those sorts of things. So
it's like you say. I mean, I think I could do that at the first support network, because maybe that is it, that they sort of getting hung up on the terms, because to me the biopsychosocial model is the whole thing about holistic support.
It is, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And so you know, probably if I said, well, actually this is linked to to holistic concepts, and that's what we're looking for, and they probably all go, oh yeah, you know, I know that. So it could be
it's about permissions, though, isn't it? It's about being confident that you know what you know, and what you know, what you should know.
That's it.
Yeah, it's Johari's window, really, isn't it?
So for the plan then, for the support network meeting, that's what I could do. Well, as I say, I know I've still got the timetable, so I could sort of talk a bit about the timetable and the structure of the learning, and I could dig out a theme so they can see that, and I could talk a bit about, for example, if that's causing problems, the biopsychosocial model. And the thing about stressing that the resources are there as support, but they're not there to restrict people. And they're essentially they're there as a starting point, and they're not there to restrict people. And then it's for the centres to conduct their own research and develop their own sort of supporting materials.
Do you think we could pick this out as the theme, so that it's all focused on this rather? So the theme that we look at is the theme around was it I can't remember the theme now. Was it for all? Was it social model, biopsychosocial model, and
it was, I remember it was in unit 1. And it was in relation to, it was the whole thing about holistic support, holistic care and support. So it was all around that.
I'm just going to put that into a search engine now and see what comes up. Okay, well, we've got social care whale or a social care blog around that. We've got stuff around nursing, holistic model of health. So there's loads of stuff. There'll be stuff on Sky and stuff as well.
You know what I could do as well, thinking about it, I don't know if you think this might, I might suggest some search terms. Because so that it gives them confidence in terms of, because I think that is a big part of it, is knowing where to look. And so I could just come up with a list of, you know, suggested search terms, because I can try that, just like Susie just done now, in relation to the biopsychosocial model.
Yeah, and
so that people don't feel stranded.
It just came up with it's fairly you know, it's come up with Engel, George Engel, 1977. To understand a person's mental condition, it's not simply the biological, it's a psychological and social factors, which is exactly what's covered in the presentation.
Yeah.
And yeah,
loads of images there that they can use.
Yeah.
You know, I think this is what my point was, that, you know, when you look at what we've said in the qualification handbook, and we refer to at the top of the guidance page, you know, it's really clear that whilst it says topics to cover, at the top it says guidance. You know, and we do need folk to be confident that, you know, they know this stuff, you know, or they should know this stuff, and if they don't know it, that, you know, they're confident in where they can find the answers.
That's it, they know where to look.
Yeah.
So many things open on the desktop.
Yeah, me. Yeah.
No, I think we've certainly got some food for thought, and I think our initial plan is a good one.
So do you want me to, because I know, Karen, you're off next week, aren't you?
Oh God, yes.
But what I can do is, if I'll use tomorrow before Karen goes off, just to develop a program for the first support network meeting. I mean, this time it's good because we've got a little bit of breathing space because it's the 23rd of March. But if I at least come up with the program, and also what I'll attach is those documents that I'm talking about, because I know I've got them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll do that tomorrow.
And as part of the programme, Adelafter, for each of the network meetings, if we can make sure that we break people into rooms to do some more informal discussions about whatever it is. So so however you're doing it, so just thinking about that as part of that network, we get people into rooms. Yeah.
So maybe what I could do is do a much shorter presentation at the start.
Yeah.
Say 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Because they'll still need a break. So whatever I need to do for people as a whole, do that to begin with, and then we go into our breakout rooms.
Yeah.
And then come back at the end.
Yeah, always come back at the end, because there can be feedback from the breakout rooms into the main room then. So there's usually probably about 10 minutes at the end for feeding back any key issues.
Yeah, so that's how I'll sort of structure it then. A main presentation, then breakout, to sort of facilitate the discussion, and then return to main group at the end. So we could do it that way.
It was nice to see today, though, Susie, that people talking about sharing best practice in those breakout rooms. That was lovely.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone is, you know, at the same starting point with this, aren't they?
Yeah.
Perhaps those that maybe were involved in the stepping up to management, or perhaps have been, you know, went through the stepping up to management, perhaps are maybe a little bit ahead. But, you know, I think that fundamentally, you know, it's the learning is considerable. You know, so, and you know, there's just under 300 hours gap in the middle between GLH and TQT. So, you know, there is an expectation of quite a bit of self-directed study and you know, that assessment process.
I was a bit concerned with Gemma with that 2 years to do both qualifications. I think that would be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
Not just on delivery, but on the learner as well.
Yeah.
They would be exhausted.
They would.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know that this is a very common thing that happens. You know, even though you do reinforce GLH and TQT, and you talk about funding. I mean, the colleges will be paid on TQT. They will be paid to deliver the full amount, and it may well be that they've also negotiated additionality on that as well, and then to come back and then go, right, we're going to slice hours off. You know, I think that's quite, at this start of the program, it's quite short-sighted, because actually the people that are going to lose out potentially are the learners, in the context of, you know, will they be successful in their end assessments, and also the pressure that it's going to put on the delivery team. You know?
The other thing that we worked out, and I'm wondering whether it might be worth feeding this in, Madelata, you know, in the pilot where we underestimated the amount of time learners would need each week, and then we upped it then, didn't we, for the rollout?
Yeah.
So it might be worth feeding that into people as well as part of the timetabling.
Yeah, because as you say, and also the fact that I can remember we cut back on the learning materials as well.
We did, yeah.
So yeah, as you say,
why was that then, Magdalena? Why did you cut back? Was it just too much for them?
Too much for them, yeah.
For the pilot, yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that balance, isn't it, between giving them enough and encouraging them to do self-directed study, and then giving them almost everything so they don't have to think.
Yeah, we just stripped some of the stuff out, Susie. So I guess we rationalised then for after the pilot for the